So I actually came from industry. So I worked like all good Australians in News Corp for many years. So I've done my media time. I've also worked radio, newspapers, magazines in my 20s. Then I worked in FMCG. So I went to Diageo. I was brand manager for the premium malt group, Johnny Walker premiums, all of that sort of Stolichnaya, all that sort of stuff in Australia. I also then I was head of the Australian Tourism Commission Research and Brand Communications team. So I've kind of seen lots of different sectors. And then, as you do, you have children and life changes. And I made a decision because my kids are only 1 year the gap. So I decided to do a PhD, as you do. And I'd always had a passion for media, and I was offered a scholarship with Ehrenberg Bass, so I know that there's some people who have heard of Ehrenberg Bass before, to do a PhD I'd already done undergrad and masters in my younger days, in media, and in particular looking at segmentation across media types and looking at the impact of hyper-targeting and all of the stuff that you may have read in How Brands Grow, etc. Fast forward 15 years, I found myself a little frustrated with the university system, to be honest. It was less than agile, and what I made a decision to do was step away from being a university employee, although I'm still a professor, but I'm a professor with a different university who allow me to essentially call my own time, and I mentor students, but I don't teach anymore. So I'm still a professor, but I now run a small research agency that is very much connected to and lives by Ehrenberg, Frank Bass principles, which is very much about understanding how brands grow first and then looking at how other things affect that. So with this, the other thing that I managed to do was I became quite interested about 3 years ago in the development of technology. So up until that point, all the research that I'd done was fairly straightforward. It was quantitative, large, but nothing technology-based. And I made a decision to start to investigate the use of computer vision, and my life changed, quite frankly. So what I do now is I run a small agency. There's about 10 of us roughly, and we all have our PhDs from Ehrenberg Bass, but I also have a team of developers. Now, this funny man, the purpose of the name is, technology is kind of the shiny new thing, but I do really believe that human intelligence will always prevail. And this particular professor was a famous professor out of MIT alongside of Marvin Minsky. So if anyone's kind of heard of AI, they'd be more likely to hear of Marvin Minsky, who believes that machines or robots will take over the world. He was also from MIT in the 50s and 60s. But this guy, J.C. Licklider, believed in this man plus machine symbiosis, which means that humans will always have a role to play in the development of the research, and technology will supplement that. And that's also sometimes known as amplified intelligence. So that's what we believe in. So with that said, everything that we do, we build, so this side of us kind of build the research design and the methodology, and we think about, as I said, how brands grow, and then we, brief the technology team, and they adapt what we need to get the answers. So this is, what I'm going to show you is a little bit about what we've done for a particular client. We've done lots of other stuff. So yeah, we're a bunch of trained researchers plus computer engineers. These are just a couple of the last couple of years only. But in my time with Ehrenberg Bass, I consulted for, everyone from P&G to Unilever to Google to Facebook to you name it. So I've had quite a bit of industry, for an academic, industry experience. Not that this is of interest, but I'm very much about getting amongst the reality. So often in academic institutions, you're quite removed from the real world. So where I publish, I try and actually publish more in trade press than I do in academic journals. And fortunately, my current university, they don't mind, they live off my profile, really. So yeah, I'm a big believer in getting my word out using traditional, I should just say, media that actually gets to a lot of people. Let's start with what we're here for. So I'm quite I'm old, so I have a lot of networks, and I'm quite connected into the Australian media marketplace. I know a lot of the CEOs of the major networks, and about 2 years ago, was approached by a couple of them because they had made a decision to start up Think TV. And Think TV is like Screenforce, I think, and Think Box, and there's lots of them around the world now. But Australia didn't have one, and unfortunately in the Australian market, the major networks were working quite separately. There was no synergy. So they approached me and said, look, we're kind of putting together a Think TV association. Would you be interested in doing some work with us? And the reason being is that we don't understand what's happening in that TV, a lot of clients are just putting all their money into the digital, how using that word, let's just say social platforms. And money seems to be going away from, again, I hate this word, legacy media, which has great reach, fast, but traditional. So as the media owners, as the media agencies get younger, they seem to be pushing their dollars into more sort of new media without a lot of credible research. So they said to me, the pendulum has definitely swung too far. What can we do? I said, well, that's pretty easy for me. I said, because even though I have worked with Facebook and I've worked with Google, and I've written a book with Oxford on content diffusion through social, I'm a big believer of vast and fast reach traditional platforms, knowing what I know about how brands grow, which is you have to reach lots of people that are like buyers to nudge market share, right? So I said, that's quite easy for me. We need to almost re-establish a baseline, because I think what's happened is younger people have come in and said, oh my God, engagement, you've got to get lots of likes, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, but there's not really a concentrated, let's put it all in and start again and work out where everyone sits. So that's what they asked me to do. And I said, well, that's fine, except I technically am a professor, and if I did anything that was biased, or, because I said funded by TV networks, thank you, except you have to do it my way, and we'll be presenting the results, not some of the results. So we needed to make sure that we started really robustly. And I think that's really, for me personally, that's a really important takeout here, that I was super fair to all platforms, and I'll explain how as we go on, for the sole purpose of making sure this was not biased, right? But what we decided to do was kind of go back to basics, right? Test the media attributes that are known to help brand growth. And I often kind of go, you don't need a PhD to know that if you strip it all back, at the end of the day, Brand Growth 101, you need an ad to cut through so that it penetrates memory to be thought of at the buying occasion. That's as simple as it is. It really is. Stripping back all of the secret sauce, engagement measures, all of this, at the end of the day, ads need to cut through to be thought of at the buying occasion to nudge your memory to go, oh yes, that one, I'll choose that one. So we made a call to test cut through and memory and see how TV, Facebook and YouTube perform under different conditions. So I will explain a bit more. So the thing with this presentation, it kind of jumps around a bit. It gets to the end and hopefully all of your questions will be answered. But just bear with me, I'm going to jump around a bit because I'll just jump to attention quickly. we made a call to, because what defines cut-through? So again, jumping back to amplified intelligence, the purpose of me using technology is to minimise human bias in research. So I am a little bit tired, given it was 20 hours, but I barely remember what I did yesterday, let alone what I saw, what ads I saw last week, right? So with traditional market research, there's a lot of human bias, particularly around memory, recall, intention. Oh my gosh. I was saying yesterday to someone, slight segue, look, I'll show you our attention scores and how we did it, but we sneaky asked them how much attention they think they're paying, and it's literally poles apart. What someone thinks they're doing compared to what they're doing, poles apart. So we made a call to build a technology-based attention measure using some computer vision, I'll explain in a minute. And then our memory structures is based on a sale, because we essentially needed to build a single source set of data where someone views an ad and then we see what they buy. The problem with traditional single source data is you can't control for anything. You know, one platform's different to another, they see different content. There is no way you can have an experiment within the confines of traditional single source. So we had to build our own. Bear with me. So I'm going to show you a really quick video that Think TV put together. It's quite basic, but I'll give you a bit more depth of the method in a minute, but it kind of summarised how we did it. Hopefully it works. Oh no, there's no sound. Do you think we could... Try it out.
In the advertising industry, there's a view that online, because it's trackable and measurable, is the future. But no one has really ever properly tested the merits of this belief. Until now, someone agnostic, someone academic, has come along to question the status quo. Someone curious about the actual facts rather than the perceptions. Karen Nelson-Field holds a PhD in media science and is a globally renowned professor of media innovation. Aided by a team of computer vision engineers and technology wizards, she has developed a unique form of artificial intelligence and machine learning to pioneer the delivery of non-biased research into the real impact of modern advertising. Commissioned by Think TV to undertake the benchmark series, the good professor and her team of boffins questioned the commonly held assumption that hyper-targeted online advertising delivers the most impact. Under natural viewing conditions, she exposed more than 2,500 everyday Aussies to some 20,000 advertisements across different platforms and devices. And then she compared how people viewed ads with what they ultimately decided to buy in a virtual store. Eye-tracking software recorded people's attention across a 30-minute period for nearly 2,000 viewing sessions on mobile devices, laptops and big screen TVs. An inbuilt app scanned screens and recorded any advertising that appeared, then used eye tracking to see whether respondents paused for how long and how much of the ad, in terms of pixels, was in view on screen. And the final stage of the research involved people shopping in a virtual supermarket. Known as discrete choice modelling, it is recognised as the most realistic way to measure consumers' actual choice of brand. The results are seismic, likely to shake up many widely held misconceptions around today's advertising platforms and ultimately show where advertisers get the most bang for their buck. So, stay tuned.
Okay, so that's a pretty basic overview of the scale, but I will say that was built before we did our second tranche, so we're already up to about 35,000 exposures. It was 20,000 at the time, and the sample has nearly doubled. I think we are up to about 80 24-hour days of viewing through this experiment, so it's big, really, really large. I'll try and give you a bit more background. Again, we wanted to test actual viewing in a natural environment, so we didn't want to use a lab. So the problem is you know, a lot of eye tracking or gaze is based on goggles, or, you know, it's in a laboratory setup. We didn't want that because we wanted scale in terms of numbers. We had to control for the same ads because having written a book on content diffusion and what makes content, which content characteristics work best, I know that ad A and ad B can have a completely different impact on attention. So we needed to make sure that the same ads were populated into all of the different platforms so that it isolates then any effect of the platform, because otherwise if you saw one ad on Facebook and you saw one ad on TV, that possibly is unfair to one or the other. So we had to do it this way. We wanted to make the collection passive by way of, again, we didn't want obtrusive goggles or anything, so we ended up building some technology that could intercept the camera of any device. So mobile, tablet, TV, PC, I forget. And again, it's about being single source, so it's viewing and sale. So the choice component is the sale. So what happens is after they've, and I'll explain in the flow in a second, once they've viewed their particular nominated platform, then they're a little discrete choice. So I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with discrete choice modelling, but it's essentially, would you make, here's a shopping shelf, and here's the test category, which could be anything from deodorant to chips to you know, fast food, whatever it is. Which one would you choose? And they put it into a little basket. So then you model out those effects, and I'll explain that in a minute. So back to this is how we did it. So we had to start with, we had to work out, well, which ads are we going to use? Which ads are we going to test? So again, being fair to the online groups, because I know that there would have been, you know, a lot of people want to criticise what I was doing because potentially it could have a negative effect on their commercial operations. So we actually went, well, we'll pick ads that are online and we'll reverse populate them onto TV. So if anything, it's unfair to TV. So what we did is we sent 1,000 people, we built an app, which is what it said in the thing. We asked people to download this app that we built. There's a double opt-in, so in fairness of Cambridge Analytica, it's a double opt-in, and they knew that we were going to intercept their camera. We also did not collect any personal information whatsoever, so they know that. So they download the app, they're asked to go onto YouTube and just do whatever. Really do whatever. We didn't care where they went. But what the technology in the background did is we coded it to recognise when a sponsored ad was going to pop up, and we grabbed it and we popped it into the creative bucket. Grabbed it, popped it into the creative bucket. So they saw these ads. And then the other thing that the app is designed to do is sort of understand the scale of the ad, whether it's being scrolled, so pixels, which is whether it's kind of scrolling below the feed or above the feed. Also the size of the ad relative to the screen, so the app defines the size of the screen automatically, so it does a whole lot of stuff in the background while it's videoing essentially the face. And I'll explain the model in a minute. The attention model we built essentially to understand whether you're looking at the screen and the ad, or at the screen and not the ad, or away. Okay. So now we've got 1,000 people in YouTube who've seen a bunch of ads. They're all in our creative bucket. Those people, we then transpose those ads into our virtual shelf really quickly, and they were then sent this discrete choice, which had those test ads and competitor categories or competitor brands on those shelves. The next phase, knowing what we wanted to do, which was we picked, there were 15 in the end, test ads, and we picked the 15 that were mostly seen. We weren't biased in any way. We just literally picked the top 15 to give us the best sample, right? And then we tweaked the technology, and we asked people to log on. They downloaded the ad the app. In the app, it said, please press here, and it takes you to the Facebook login page. They log in of their own, which we don't collect their logins, But the app then, instead of, it still found sponsored ads, but instead of letting it run, it replaced it with ads in our bucket. So we built this kind of reverse ad block where it stopped. So in fairness, given I'm on camera, there would have been no commercial disadvantage because the person that had bought that spot would not have been considered a view because it was never loaded, right? So there was no commercial downside to any of the brands that would have been advertising in that session. So yeah, so then it worked out where the sponsored ad was, grabbed one from our creative bucket and put it in its place. So now, and then those people were sent to the same discrete choice group, the shopping centre. So now we've got people who've seen YouTube, people who've seen Facebook, the same ads with a sales choice. And then the TV one was easy because we had the production groups help us build, I think it was about 8 different programs, and those same test ads were put in the ad pods, whatever you call it, as per normal across 30 minutes. So the viewer could then choose, there was like a list on this app, and then the app would tell you, do you want to watch Ellen or MasterChef, or I hear that you love Australian MasterChef, by the way. Whatever it was, there were a whole bunch of different ones. And why we did that was because when someone uses YouTube or Facebook, naturally they skew towards content that they choose, right? And we wanted to make sure that they had some choices on TV, in fairness to TV, so they could choose a program that kind of interested them. Right, so that's the basic methodology. For the first part, for the early tranche 1, we did TV on TV screens. So for people who didn't have smart TVs, and there's a lot more of them in Australia who don't have smart TVs in here, we also sent them little baby, teeny tiny high definition cameras to attach to their laptop. So the data was collected through their laptop, but the viewing experience was on the TV in the house. That caused me some sleepless nights, but it worked. And then it was Facebook on PC and YouTube on PC originally. So back to why we chose attention, just a word up, the attention economy is coming. So we spent some time yesterday with, the likes of FinPanel. I mean, obviously I know everyone from Nielsen and Comscore, etc. And trying to find a universal currency called reach is so difficult. And I know that a lot of players, and in fact some have called me, are looking towards something that is more universal and less platform specific. So attention is coming as a measure of impact, one that can be universal. So this particular professor, who's an awesome guy, has written some work on the effect of inattention, essentially. Now, he is a professor in marketing, but the attention economy essentially talks about the era that we're facing where inattention can cause road deaths and inattention can cause, lots of breakdowns or lack of productivity at workplace, because we're so bombarded with so many things. So the attention economy is the literature if you want to have a read. So we chose to look at attention because we believe, particularly given we looked at it passively. So again, the camera was initiated, we trained our machine learning models to understand facial trajectory and also eyes. So with the TV it was harder because of the distance, so we had a double model that also could see kind of where you were physically looking rather than just your little pupils, which might have been 4 metres away. And so again, it wasn't anyone claiming what they saw, claiming what they recalled, telling us what they intend to buy. What I know from my own research is that intention, oh my gosh, my word. Yes, if you intend to do something compared to what you actually, intention, is that the word? Oh my gosh, I'm way English today. I'm clearly between Finnish and Australian. Yeah, so the relationship between intention to buy and actual buying behaviour is so vastly not the case. So again, this is purely passive. So this is how we did it. And it just kind of makes it fair for all platforms, right? So let's talk about attention starting here. So the other thing we did to make it really robust was we captured attention 5 frames per second. 5 frames per second. So it was a continuous gaze model rather than there be any, because I mean you can do a lot of things in 5 frames per second, and we can see even in our data that you can look away, look there, look this, and you know, like it's quite incredible. So we really wanted to make it really granular. The point of this slide is that TV, and we expected this quite frankly, TV gains twice the active viewing of YouTube, and overall in an average second, 58% are paying attention, right? There's a 58% rate of attention compared to YouTube, which is 45, and Facebook, which is essentially a third of the overall attention score for TV. Now, I'm going to get to the why in a minute, because as a researcher, just demonstrating this to me is a bit boring. It's the why, and we'll get to that. But this is also a bit interesting to me, the rate of passive. So again, we split it into 3. So the average attention is the combination of the scores as a whole. And as we go forward, it's getting too complicated to split it out. So we're going to start using overall attention as our baseline. But we've now done 22 groups. But passive viewing is when, so active avoidance is easy, you're not looking at it. Active attention is when you're looking not just at the screen, but at the ad itself, because bear in mind, we had a behind the scenes ad tag. So we knew mathematically, if you were looking there, where mathematically it was sitting on the page at the time, so we could correlate that. And then this third one called passive attention, which is kind of a bit of a hybrid. It's you're not actually looking at the ad, but you're not looking very far. And in the case of Facebook and YouTube, it's looking at the screen, but not directly at the ad. So what we did find, in fairness to the social platforms, and this makes sense, that passive viewing does play a reasonable role in gaining sales, and we'll get this in a minute. And that's because you kind of, even if you're not directly looking at it, but if you're looking at something, you know you've got peripheral vision, right? So we could see that passive viewing did play a role in fairness to Facebook. What I will sort of preface now is saying we looked at the relationships between attention and product choice. Again, product choice is did you buy or did you not buy? Pretty simple. And what we could see consistently across all of our early data was attention is highly related to product choice. So again, you need to see something and essentially pay attention to it for it to have an impact on your behaviour. And again, I kind of go, well, obviously, if you don't see something, if it doesn't cut through, you're not going to have, you know, there's not going to be a behavioural effect. What's also important to me is to explain the depth of this research. So I'm only talking, this last group was only 8, we've now done 22 with ThinkTV. But this is not the first time I've done this. It was actually for Unilever Global, but we started this process about 3 years ago, but all the results were embargoed, quite frankly. But what I can tell you is that the results are, from an aggregated perspective, near identical. Very, very comfortable. So we in academia, particularly coming out of Ehrenberg Bass, it's important that results generalise because then they're meaningful, right? There's always some tiny little deviations at the individual level, but I'm a big believer that just because you find significant difference in one study means nothing. If you replicate it and then it's the same, but you use different conditions, or you replicate it again and then it's the same and use different conditions, then it becomes interesting. So the conditions in this case are different countries. We did it across 4 different platforms, or devices, sorry, and also multiple platforms, which I can't give you this, so Twitter and then a lot of the Chinese, I can't give you those specific results. Other than we can see attention and choice, and I'll talk about visibility in a minute, are highly related. So pretty cool for us. And I think it's when I talk about this work, again, some people criticise because it was funded by TV. Well, we've had others fund it, and it's the same. So Okay, so I've kind of given you the answer. If attention and product choice are related and TV gets more attention, then, you know, no surprises that TV drives more sales, essentially, because one is related to the other. Now, let me explain this number, which, in my opinion, the number is irrelevant. I think TV love the numbers, but I kind of go, it's the patterns I'm looking at, not the specifics of the numbers. But it's essentially an index. So if you think of 144 as it's 44% more impactful than if you didn't see it, that's kind of how you consider it, and you look at the differences that way. So we're looking at 16 versus 18 versus 44. And at the end of the day, what we do is we kind of look at, if you did see it, did you buy or did you not buy? If you didn't see it, did you buy or did you not buy? Okay, so that's another thing which I kind of probably didn't really describe yesterday. We use control groups for people that don't see the test ads so that we understand what the baseline is, right? So it's really important. So again, TV gets more sales, TV nudges more sales than the other platforms, and it's a direct outcome of gaining more attention. So as a researcher, I love that I expected that, but I want to know more. I want to know why that is the case rather than leave it at that. And now, I told you, like all good Australians, I worked for News Corp in my 20s for a lot of years. And I remember then we used to sell, that was the days of, it went to tabloid eventually, but it was broadsheet originally. And, yes, I'm old. And we used to sell, like, it would cost more money if you framed the page with your ad, right? So obviously a full page is one thing, but if you've got editorial around the ad, they charge quite a premium for there not to be any clutter around it, just editorial. And even then though, I don't think they had any research on whether the lessening clutter had an impact, but we just charged an extra 25%. And people paid it. So I kind of thought back to those days and went, I wonder if it's because when you actually sort of sit back and think about the experience, when you watch a TV ad, there's no other ads around it. There's no other, apart from life happening, there's no other competing forces on the screen. When you think of Facebook and it's in your feed, now particularly on the PC, it's in your feed and there's stuff going on here and there's who's online there and there's chats coming up here and there's things going on. And similarly, YouTube, you've got comments, you've got you know, all sorts of things going around it, what videos you should watch next. I wondered whether the degree or the scale of the ad on the screen made a difference. And I kind of thought back to some work that I did at Arambobas actually when I was doing some work with TV, radio and Facebook, and wanted to understand whether clutter, now this in particular was more about the amount of ads they saw, but is related, had a negative impact on the degree to recall. And again, in those days, and being in a university, there was nothing technology about it, it was just recall. But there still were patterns, right? So some work I did years ago was the more ads you see, the less you're going to remember them, okay? So I went, all right, well, we've got this technology now where we've tagged all the ads, and we did that specifically for the gaze, but the output of that data means that I can see now the proportion of the ad that it covers, because we also collected for all the screen sizes. Let's have a look. So then we said, you know, as an artifact of clutter, how does coverage impact attention? Before we continue, let me, again, I've kind of described this to you, but the average screen coverage varies considerably. So average screen coverage on Facebook is only 10% of the screen. Average screen coverage of YouTube is 30. TV is 100% of the time, right? Just think about your user experience. The next round is when there was no scrolling, because obviously there's scrolling, so average means when it's, you know, being moved across the screen quite a lot. But sure enough, we could see a really, really strong relationship between coverage and sales, coverage and attention, right? So that's a visibility thing, being able to see it. that's just describing it, that it shows it in table font. And again, with the TV, we kind of went, well, that makes sense because TV's maxed across all devices. So then we went, all right, well, let's get a little bit juicier. So who knows what the viewability standard is? You'd have to, I'm sure. So that's the MRC, the Media Ratings Council of America, viewability standard that says, so in about 2014, you know, online was rogue and people were being, you know, were paying for views that were not seen, right? So apart from, you know, bots, there was slow load, there was, you know, a sliver of an ad was considered a view and people were paying full total odds for these views. So around 2014, the Media Rating Council, which is connected or mandated via Washington, so it's a pretty serious group, said enough, we're going to say that you don't pay for an advertiser online unless 50% of it is shown from 2 continuous seconds. So you know the viewability standard, right? So what's contentious about this is you've got the Mark Zuckerbergs on this end going, no, 2 seconds is too much, 50% is too high, let's kind of drop it down a bit. And we know why, because I haven't got this data here, but I can show you. We can see what proportion of their inventory, if we increased it to 100%, 0. So they've got a commercial issue. The smaller or the looser the standards, the more inventory they can charge, right? But then you've got, you know, your Keith Weeds, your Pinges, Unilevers, your Mars on this end, who I know these people and have said to me, but why should we pay for 50% of the ad that we built? You know, we want to force it to 100%. So the MRC, in fairness, have said, in the middle. But we went, well, why don't we have a look at this? Because there's not really been any research done to understand whether seeing an ad on screen at 50% does negatively impact the sale. So that's what we did, is 50% enough for attention and sales. Again, we had this data, already explained this, so we consider the relationship between pixels, time, attention, and sales. So the good news, I'll be honest, I've had a conversation with the president of MRC about this work, and we've been published, and in essence, I hate using this word, but this work went viral because of the nature of its outcome. He was a little bit cross about how we were portraying, because I'm sort of thinking about it from a brand owner perspective. So I do say, in fairness to the MRC, the minimum standard does actually have an impact. And again, I often say, well, if I was in Australia, I'd say no shit Sherlock, but I really kind of mean, obviously, if you don't see an ad, or if you see it 50%, it's going to have some impact than if you don't see it, right? So that is no shit Sherlock in Australia. But what happens after that is what's interesting. So as the more pixels on screen, the greater the impact, right? To the point where if you see an ad 100% pixels, it's twice the sales, twice the attention rate. So we published on this, and it got quite a bit of publicity, just so you know. I'm waiting for that photo and then I'll keep moving. So we kind of went to print and said, you know, there's definitely a performance upside. And again, in fairness to the MRC, they've just called to readjust the viewability standards, and I believe next year they're going to push for 100%. So that's good news and fair to the likes of television, who are always 100% pixels. And no surprises, pixels matter to attention also. We've already discussed this. This is another interesting thing that we found. So even if it's 100% pixels, which you can see on the left, the bigger the screen coverage, it kind of adds incremental sales to it. So as pixels approach their limit of opportunity, coverage becomes more vital. So just having 100% but still lots of clutter around still doesn't cut it. It's when it's combined, which is why TV does so well in this work. So I often say not all reach is equal. So a view on a platform where your view is acceptable at 50% of pixels or less than 100% of coverage, definitely not equal to 100% coverage, 100% pixels, 100% of the time. So that's why I kind of challenge the panels and go, you're calculating reach, but they're not all reach is equal. I might not overthink this bit so this was a lot of work, and there's a whole lot of other things that fall below this. So we then kind of looked at the TV ecosystem and we looked at sponsorships, we looked at different day parts. We actually did have a control and test for clutter. So we in Australia, it's 5 ads per ad break. I don't know what it is here, it's different everywhere. So we reduced them right down to 1, and without obviously a doubt, the fewer ads in the ad break, the greater the impact of sales. So I know in Australia, they're now working out the commercial issues around that, because if you reduce an ad break by 4 ads, it's 4 lots of advertising money that they'll lose, so they're trying to work out commercials to reduce clutter. But the sponsorship ones is interesting, and do contact me if you do want that information, and we're doing some more about it now. But sponsorship was a really interesting one because and this makes sense. So going back to the average attention, even though TV was 58%, so in an average second it's about 58% of attention, right? That's still not 100%, but it jumps right up when it's in program. That makes sense too. So we looked at, funnily enough, MasterChef, and we looked at whether a brand was, when I say sponsorship, whether it was in the program, so the contestants were using Coles branded chops, or whether they were in the shops or any of that sort of stuff, a significant uplift in attention and sales. So I've got all that information if you do want to have a look at it. But the point of it here is that visibility is king, that the programming nuances help, and they would help in the Facebook and YouTube setting as well. So bear in mind, we controlled for everything, so we cut it back. So someone asked me yesterday, what about relevancy? Well, we stripped relevancy out by the nature of the methodology. So I'm guessing if you threw relevancy back in, it would help as well. But the point here is that without a doubt, being able to see the ad is the one. Okay, so we did all of this. I launched it in September. Not many people could criticise. The only thing that we got was, well, hang on, Facebook is optimised on mobile. So, of course, it's not going to work because you did it on PC. No one looks at Facebook on PC. So we redid it on mobile. And it was easy because we've already built the technology. We just tweaked it to suit really all we did was we optimised it for view direction, so orientation, they call it orientation, because obviously a camera on a PC, you can't twist your camera around, so we calculated it all based right in front, whereas on a mobile you can switch it around, so we had to train the model to understand what a face would look like if you were looking at the camera that way. So that's about all we really did. But in terms of the methodology, it was exactly the same. But bear in mind, we were like, well, we're not going to just test Facebook on mobile, we're going to test YouTube on mobile, and we're going to test TV on mobile. Let's be fair to all platforms. So the short answer is pixels do go up, particularly around YouTube, so there must be less scrolling going on. I can't explain every single component, but we can see the pixels go up, which is good news. So there's a higher rate of visibility from a pixels perspective. TV remains the same, right, clearly, because nothing changes whatever screen it is. This is kind of juicy for me. I know you took a photo of the original one. You might want to take a photo of this one because this one's the mobile results. The importance of this is that nothing's changed. So the patterns, so the stats changes slightly, I'll get to that. So the amount of sales does change, but the direction of the curve does not change. So regardless of the device, if you don't see an ad 100% on screen, then it diminishes sales. So we were pretty excited about that because from a consistency perspective, it strengthens our argument. And again, coverage improves too. So Facebook has a significant uplift in coverage. Coverage is, again, the proportion of the screen that the ad covers. But YouTube doesn't really change. And when you think about your user experience, it makes kind of sense because Facebook essentially crop everything and they just throw the news feed straight on the mobile, whereas YouTube's not that different. It kind of still this same experience with a little bit less of a view, right? But this is what's interesting. So we still can see that attention delivers more stats, but what we did start to see is that device plays a role. And again, TV on mobile delivers more attention than Facebook on mobile, than YouTube on mobile. But we could also see device proximity starting to play a role because in a machine learning model, to be able to understand facial trajectory, you need distance estimation as part of the, I'm so not a coder, but I've learned this. So we had all that data and we could see that the more lean in you are to the device, what happens, we think, is the peripheral vision changes. So again, we're not medical doctors. My children tell me that all the time, that I'm not real. But we feel that the peripheral vision tightens, so we could see that the passive viewing played a greater role even more on a smaller device, because if you kind of, you're right there, it's right in your eye. So the combination of closeness to the screen as well as the visibility became more of a thing. But this is the juicy one. So these were the original STAS scores, so these are our sales scores. What I don't think Facebook expected, they said to us, well, Facebook will get more sales on mobile. Yes, but so did everyone else. And relative to the patterns that we know, which is that visibility rules. So TV gets more sales too on a mobile, as does YouTube. So they're not optimized for device. Everyone gets, it's a better experience on that device. So we say visibility is still king. So here's some of the generalizations now that we are kind of going, look, there's stuff that sits behind that. As I said, there's a combination of, the device, the platform, the visibility, all sorts of things that happens. But at the end of the day, gaining more attention delivers more product choice. And what drives that, from what we can see primarily, is the visibility element. So if you go away today with anything, TV delivers 100% pixels, which is important, 100% coverage, 100% of the time by comparison. So if Facebook were to ever deliver advertising in that way, which essentially then is a TV device, then sure, I'm sure it would not be any different, but at the moment they don't. So visibility, sales and attention are all interrelated. So we kind of say, from a TV perspective, this is good news, and we believe that so it kind of looks at the attributes that matter are the visibility elements. So hopefully that helps.